Hey, everybody. Welcome to Reboot It Rewind. I am Ron Swallow, and we are here to talk to you guys about all the crazy stuff that happened for the Matrix Rebooted episode. We got the whole crew. We got Ed Greer.
Hey.
We got producer Bill.
What up?
And we got Billy Business.
Yo, let's talk about the most harmonious episode we did. Well, no, I mean, honestly, I just want to start by saying that I just had a sense memory to us doing the episode. And when my hands up, I felt hostage. You know what I mean? There was like, it was one of those things where I think I'll just start my part. I think I might have brought some bad mojo to it because I really didn't think we could do it. It was a seed of disbelief inside my bones, maybe a little bit. You know what I mean? That got exacerbated over the course of it being so difficult. So I'll own that part of it. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're only as strong as the weakest believer in your cult.
Well, you guys,
go ahead, Ron. No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, the thing is, part of this is my fault because we all wanted. We have a whole list. We have a list of different reboots that we all want to do. We put it together as a little kayfabe for you guys. We send emails back and forth, and I had just been harping that we have to do the Matrix because I knew.
To be fair, Ron, like I remember back like the very beginning we were coming up with the show, like Matrix was one that I remember both you and I were both like, we have to do it at some point. And we had like some really tough ones on there that like, Godfather and Forrest Gump and stuff. But Matrix
Which we might still do, by the way.
We might still do.
Yeah.
We never know.
Yeah.
But I remember I was like, well, Matrix seems a lot easier. And then, as the time came, I was never against doing the Matrix. I know Ed was. I was never against it. I just was like, yeah, sure, that sounds like one that we should do. But woof. I didn't think it would be that hard.
I was so against it.
Really?
I want to get this out up front. I feel like I don't know that I'm the most modulated one of the group, but I certainly am the least sort of wear my heart on my sleeve out of all of us. I was so against that idea. Just I don't even know if the four of us have talked about this. I thought that was a really dumb idea to do from the beginning for all the reasons that ended up really tripping me up in the episode. And I feel like I'll just cop to it. I was probably the biggest sort of impediment through that episode because I just couldn't get past the fact of like, look, if we're gonna do the Matrix, I don't want to do message board BS. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't want to do just some easy off the top of the dome. Any idiot on the internet could come up with this idea. And I feel like for the Matrix in particular, out of any of these properties, that was so burning in my mind. And I'm not going to apologize for it because I do think that like that's the thing that people should be getting from this show, and that's the thing that we should be putting into this show is like, look, we have to elevate the conversation.
I just think like there's always kind of been like this fundamental difference. We start almost every reboot. It's like, what does an audience expect? What's the theme? And I kind of feel like we as four people almost never agreed to what the audience expects or what we expect from Reboot It as a concept. Because to me, and I think why I got so mad in the course of this episode, which we'll get to, but was just like, we have to achieve reboot. We don't, it might not be Shakespeare. It might not be as good as the original. And I was like, I personally was okay with coming to the realization that Reboot It didn't always mean make it better. It just means like the task is we have to take this property and try to bring it, bring a new spin on it, bring our spin on it. And in the case of the Matrix, I just never wanted to shy away from something that seemed too hard because then we just eliminate so many potential future episodes because it's like, well, if this is too hard, then The Godfather's too hard, then Jurassic Park's too hard, then, a lot of the stuff we've already done
And the
is
most
too hard.
important, greatest movie of all time, The Room, is too hard.
But that's what I think that's why we just we were butting heads before we even got into this. I didn't know that you didn't want to do it because to my memory, you weren't as vocal as like Ed was.
No, and I wasn't going to be. I just want to also say, guys, I'm watching the chat as we're doing this, so I definitely have to say, Charles Clark, let's go Colts, baby.
I gotta point out this important shirt that I'm wearing right here.
We all see it, Ron. Nobody was going to comment on it. Although I do have to say this, Nicole Brandstetter in the chat says Ron be looking fine AF today.
Thank you.
That's Ron's mom, and we all know.
I'm pretty sure my mom doesn't call me fine. I hope not. Handsome is fine from my mom.
She says F-O-I-N-E, fine. Foine. You look foine.
I cut my hair myself.
It looks pretty good.
The lady, my girlfriend fixed the back, of course, because I don't know if you've ever tried to cut your own back of your own hair. That never goes well.
Yeah, kind of like the reboot at Matrix.
Yeah, so Billy, I want to address what you just said, which is you didn't know that I was so against it, because I think all four of us sort of bring a different collaborative spirit into this, and I think I am very aware that in any sort of creative collaboration, my default setting is to try to be domineering, and that's just some work I've done on myself. And so now I try really hard to catch myself before I default to, no, we're not doing it that way. This isn't going to work for XYZ reasons. I'd rather let it play out and see what happens. And so I started that episode, and maybe it was unfair to you guys, because I honestly started that episode with every expectation that it was going to be a complete disaster, but I didn't actually verbalize it to you. And so I think I brought that bias into it, and that may have contributed to the fact that, like, once we all started going different directions, I was very quickly ready to throw my hands up and be like, okay, we don't even know what we're talking about here, let alone are we coming up with an interesting story.
Well, and that's what's funny about it is, though, through the course of the episode, it seemed like we were so many cats with their tails tied together trying to run away from each other for a while in the episode. You know what I mean? We were doing that thing, and in the midst of that, we were scratching each other because we were blaming each other for, like, why are you tying me to this? Scratch. We were scratching each other, and then Billy seemed like the one that was just like, you know what? Fuck this. Damn this. Darn this. I'm out.
I love that you cover
our PG-13. That was our one.
That was it.
Okay, but I'm just saying, it seems like Billy was the one in the episode that sort of did that. But, like, to echo Bill's sentiments, I had my hands in this position, ready to go up and to throw my hands up. I was prepared to throw my hands up because I felt as though it was too difficult. But I also felt as though I understood where Bill was coming from, that we had to do something to smarten it up. It's been 20 years hence. We have to be smarter, and that burden was a lot, and it was a burden to adventure. You know what I'm saying? It kind of weirded out the adventure part of the movie.
And can I say, in defense of all of you guys that were reticent to do it, it makes sense. The original Matrix was such a great amalgam of so many different things, from taking the best in technology that we could possibly have and revolutionizing, did I say that right? The whole movie industry with bullet time and the different ways that it looked in the fight scenes, and taking philosophy that is kind of a complicated philosophy and making it something that regular people were totally into. So I understand why you were, like, freaked out about trying to put this together.
But I think one thing you said there, it just triggered for me in my head. One of the big issues that I had coming into the episode was that I knew specifically you, Ron, would be more focused on the first Matrix movie.
Yeah.
When I knew I specifically would be focused on the two sequels,
and the
fact that those two sequels were literally written and designed to just pull the rug out from everything that happened in the first movie.
Yeah.
And so it becomes really hard to try to talk about, like, well, how do we do the Matrix again? Because it's such a different question. Are we going to revisit the story from the first Matrix, or are we going to revisit what the story turned into after Reloaded and Revolutions?
Yeah. And so I gotta say, I was impressed with you guys for having the patience to eventually push through the whole thing. I mean, we all could have, we all could have given up.
There. Look, I think part of it is, you know, Bill, you're saying like you had a negative mindset going in. It's like, well, I mean, like I'm the same way. Look, the reality of doing most of those reboots, they're either on weekends or weeknights because we have jobs and we have other stuff we have to do. So I'm coming into this reboot. It's hot as balls outside. And the reason that I say that is because you have to turn off your AC and you have to turn off your fan when you're recording because you don't want to pick it up. Like right now, I don't give a shit. If you hear my fan, whatever. I'm not sweating my balls off for this one. But for an episode, you can't do that. So I've had a long day. I'm sitting drenched in sweat. We're all taking really passive-aggressive jabs at each other's lack of philosophical intelligence and just kind of like sucking ourselves off. And then we stop halfway through and it's like, I don't think this is going to work. I think that just was my breaking point, not even to the episode, but to that entire day where I was like, you did not just waste an hour of my time sitting in my own sweat and filth for no good reason. Like, if you guys want to sit here and have a pissing contest, fine, but I'm gonna leave if that's the case. And that's why I got so heated. I think it was just like this boiling pot of just like nothing was working. Nothing was working, and we couldn't get over ourselves.
Right. Oh, and to that point, I was like, you know, in any sort of movie when there's a character who, maybe because they're a magical Negro, maybe because of different factors, training they have, but they say, y'all don't want to go that way. That way is fucked up. There's punchy sticks and dragons and bad over there. And then that person goes along with the group into that situation, and they're the one that ends up getting fucking killed. That's sorry, but that's how I felt in the middle of it. That's how I felt. I felt like I knew it was going to be bad. I let myself get dragged into it, and then I got killed, especially because on that one I can feel it. Nobody tries to keep tallies. These are all our communal ideas, but at the same time, sometimes you can tell when you're contributing more or you're contributing less. And I felt like I was contributing nothing because I couldn't find any purchase on any of it, even as I tried to push through, you know, because I pushed through several times before our Honey, I Shrunk the Kids episode. I didn't want to do that. Don't get that next to me with a 10-foot pole. And that ended up being great. And I tried to push through it, and I did on that one. So when my powers didn't kick in, when I couldn't flip the switch, as it were, on the Matrix one, it really messed me up.
Let me jump on that because we got a question in the chat about our process. And Langley Neely, who is a great fan of both of our podcasts and then this show as well, wants to know, you know, have we ever considered coming into the show and all of us pitching our own ideas to each other and trying to find some common ground with our individual pitches? And no, that is not how this show works, and very specifically so.
Top of that,
sorry, I was just gonna say, I actually think the times that we stumble and butt heads the most is when it's just like improv. It's like when you walk into the scene and you already have an idea and someone throws you a curveball, your immediate reaction is to no. Like, you have to yes and. So whenever you come into one of these things, and I think, and we'll get to it, we'll do this episode, but I think Star Wars was that way too, where maybe Ron and I kind of had our ideas and Ed had his ideas, and it's like, instead of wasting time trying to compromise, we could have just built something from ground zero together. So that's like the worst way to come into these.
Well, and the other thing is, we don't talk to each other about our ideas beforehand. Like, we don't know what we're going to say. And I think that's important. I think it's important for us to not talk about that stuff. We don't want to have a plan. We want to come in here and really try to work together, even though all of us think on different levels. Like, and obviously, go ahead.
Sorry. Well, I think there's two reasons for that. Just to elaborate on what you're saying, that, like, number one, ultimately, that is the best creative process as long as you trust the people you're working with. I think a lot of the times when you come into a creative conversation with everything predetermined in your head, it's because you don't have confidence that the people you're talking to get it on the same level that you do.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that we try to remain cognizant of, which leads into number two. The nice thing about not coming in with predetermined ideas is it allows you to internalize things that would never come up in your own head. Like the way that Ron or Ed or Billy thinks about a story, I'm not going to say that it's better or worse than me, but it's very different. And the most responsible thing for me as a creative collaborator to do is to hear that and try to integrate it with whatever I'm thinking. So if it becomes this debate about like, no, this is the right way to do it, or no, this is the wrong approach, that other shows do that and it's lame. Like, this is not a debate show. This is a show about creation.
Yeah, and just jumping on that, I love everything that was just said, because that's exactly right. And I would just add one thing, like, when we're acquiescing to the reality that if and when you're in a room pitching ideas with people, it isn't about your little written down note cards of, oh, I hope I do this right. It's in that moment, when your moment comes up to pitch your idea, to make a series better, to make a movie better, to work with people who are really making things. It's not going to be off of a series of note cards that you've serialized in the Dewey Decimal System. It's going to be you going, this is what I think. I think we should maybe multiple planets. You reel it off with confidence right there, because you've been actively listening to the people around you, and you have your shot. Now you have a great idea. We're acquiescing to that reality in this show.
So that being said, did you guys, when we were coming into the Matrix, did any of you actually have any preconceived ideas? Were you like, had you thought of something, or did you just pop in totally blank?
I think I tried to be as blank as possible. I was really influenced by the Animatrix, which I think I brought up multiple times in the episode, that I personally liked, I think I wasn't trying to sidestep like, oh, we have to come up with some new philosophical thing. I think I was more like, that part of the Matrix has been done, but there were so many cool stories from the Animatrix that I felt like we could have something very similar to that. But then again, that's just like, you find out really quick that everyone else's brain was on a different wavelength. So I shut that part down. I brought it back up later as kind of like just like a get out of jail free card to just get out of the episode. Like, can we just come up with the monster of the week to get out of it? But in terms of like this big, what would my Matrix look like? I don't have it. I'm one of the few people that actually really like the sequels. So I wasn't like, well, I'm going to pitch what I would have done, because I liked what they did.
Right. No. Yeah.
Go ahead, Ed.
No, I totally agree. Hard same as well. Not in that I like the Matrix sequels that much, but in that I understand what an arduous storytelling task they were. No matter what you did to try to explain the different levels of the Matrix, after you see a guy fly away, a lot of people, that's where they enter the story, but a lot of people, that's where they exit it. You know what I mean? And I think maybe I'm one of those people where it's like, that's where I exited it, where you've acknowledged that the system is a bad thing. You've acknowledged that you have enough power to affect it, but not destroy it. Not unless you get a lot more people on your side. That to me is like the perfect place to end that tale. Because once we talk about community organizing, I'm Harvey Milk. We're going to get everybody together. Once you get to that point of the story, it just seems weird, which is why they do all this Merovingian, all this. They do a 3-card Monty in front of your face for 2 movies. It seems like trying to make you make you desire all these deeper levels they want you to go to by showing you these moments of intrigue, is what I'm saying. I'm showing you the sub-basements, the sub-basement aspect of the Matrix, where they had witches and werewolves and stuff. That was interesting as hell to me. If I had my druthers coming in with my own preconceived ideas, I think I would have said something like, there's a part of the Matrix, in the first Matrix, it seems like everybody gets freed at the same time. What if there was sections that didn't know the war was over? Or there's sections where the computers are holed up, where they have a whole nother mythology and a whole nother way to get out of the Matrix. But again, that's almost just like the esprit d'escalier, the wit of the staircase that this property engenders is just enormous.
Yeah, I had a couple of preconceived notions.
You always do, Ron. I want to call you out, because you're the one who comes into these episodes being like, here's what I think we should do. Yeah. And it's always like, all right, well, let's hear it, but like, let's get past it.
Yeah. except for that I'm great and you guys are wrong.
I mean, not look for every
Actually, can
100
I
ideas that you throw out, like the right one is usually in there. Like
Yeah.
the one that we end up going with is usually stuck somewhere around 67.
Look, okay. I did have preconceived notions, and they were dumb. I'm gonna admit 100% right now, they were dumb. One, I was like, I just want a female lead, and I just want to explore the relationship between robots and people. Look, sometimes I'm not brilliant. I tell dick jokes to drunk people in Oregon, and and sometimes that comes out. I also have some very nuanced and intelligent material. And when I get to that stuff, I'm very good at it. But yeah, I did have preconceived notions, and I think that was another problem that we had, was because I had these kind of like ideas of where this should go. I think it definitely got in the way of us making a little progress, I would say. So let me ask you guys: after it's been a month since we did this. Maybe it seems like a year to some of you, because you haven't left your domicile for anything but food. Right. But does it still give you nightmares, or do you feel okay about the episode? How you feeling?
I can't watch it, man. I tried to watch the whole thing again, and there's like 2 rebooted episodes that I won't watch, and this is definitely one of them. I mean, so this is a story that hasn't been told publicly, but, you know, so we had kind of some bad juju on this episode, and then we bounced right back. I think we recorded the next day Super Mario Brothers, and it was like a 180 in terms of, I think we all just wanted to just like pretend like the Matrix never happened. And even if it was like some like faux niceness, it was at least like super like, yeah, let's just be best friends. And then this episode was going to come out. This was a couple weeks later, and it's almost like this thing is cursed, because we then had like differences of opinions on how to present this episode and how to market this episode. And I was like, look, I had a tantrum in the middle of this. I'd say let's Jerry Springer Maury Povich and lean into the fact that like I got mad and not everyone agreed with me, and I was like, well, blow me, we're gonna do it anyway. And then, you know, like it was just this thing where it's like you almost become possessed by this episode, and it's like my ego just took over, and I started to do things without asking and upsetting other people, and then we had to like stop and really like have some arguments again about how to present this. Like, after we do this rewind for this Matrix episode, I never want to talk about it again. I never want to look at it again. I'm like, I never say never, but I'm as close to as never as you can get for saying like, I will not do another like reboot it part 2 for this. Like, I'm done.
Well, let me jump in from the other people chair, because I was the other people he was just talking about. Like, it really made me very mad. And we had like, and guys, just I want people to get something out of this. So when we were at our maddest, it was over text. Please don't talk about anything serious or business wise in your life over text.
I think it even took us like a couple back and forth volleys to realize that there was actually bad feelings. Like, we couldn't tell if the other person was joking, and we had to jump on a phone call.
Exactly.
Ed, I want you to finish that thought. I just want to address something that's happening in the chat right here. Guys, we are going to come around to hearing your ideas about story and addressing some of your comments on the story we came up with. But part of Reboot It Rewind is that we are trying to make this a director's commentary on what you've already seen. So we are trying to unpack this, and this one is probably a little bit more cathartic than most, because like to this day, as Billy and Ed are just saying, like, we have some real weird mixed feelings about how this all went down. So we figured,
and I don't think we've ever, as 4 of us, like really talked about it. Because like I said, the next day and even subsequent recordings, like we just kind of were like, it's like the weird thing that happened that none of us talk about. We don't bring it up. Like, maybe we'll make a joke like, oh, this will be easier than Matrix, but we never like actually talk about why it was just such like a, like, I'm not going to say it almost broke the show, but I was about ready to be like, I don't want to do this again for a while, you know?
Oh no, Billy, you behind the scenes straight up threatened to quit the show based on the Matrix. Like you straight up told us you were quitting the show.
I just I didn't want to get into the I was like, I love Reboot It, and I think it was because like we had such good magic that I was a little heartbroken, although it was pretty naive to not be, that eventually we were gonna butt heads, but I was just like so heartbroken that something that I loved like doing so much was just such a nasty experience, and not just once, but like over the course of a couple of weeks of just like nastiness that was like, I don't really want this. But again, like when you get to that point, and I think that's when you and I had our phone call a couple weeks later, Ed, where it's just like, you also have to be like, well, part of that is because it's my ego, like my ego getting in the way of trying to do, like, it's never just everybody else's fault. Like sometimes you have to be like, how am I contributing to this, you know?
Well, yeah, and just to finish my thought on that, I was, again, I got to say, I was probably part of the nasty. I was one of the nasty boys. I was one of the nasty boys.
You always are, Ed.
Dude, I was one of the nasty boys. I guess I was the nasty boys because I was almost like trying to be punitive on Billy for how it went, because I felt like honestly, I didn't know exactly how Bill felt, and I knew Ron was gung-ho. So I almost counted on Billy to put the brakes on this, and he didn't. So that's strike one. I was mad that you didn't put the brakes on this and realized that it was too hard, quote unquote.
On the whole episode, you mean? I'm just
doing it, period.
Doing the episode.
Doing the episode, period, is what I'm talking about right now. But then on top of that, when we decided to debut it, we had a whole, we were going to market how frankly messed up everything had gotten, and sort of like, hey, see how we survived this on the next Maury, like Billy was saying. And I just rejected that so hard. I just disliked it, and I said something to the effect of, go ahead and do it, and if it tanks our audiences and ruins everything, then there you go, that's what you get, or something like that. Yeah. And you were so disheartened that I was like not going to be a team player, that I was going to try to eject and be like, you guys are going to look dumb, but I was the one. But again, reflect back on the guy on the shores that said, don't get on the boat and sail into the dragon's mouth.
It was funny because I was upset
on the shore
that you were threatening to do the exact same thing that I had done during the episode. Yeah,
dude, and that's what I'm trying to get to. The Matrix brought the bee out in all of us. It really did.
I gotta say, I actually kind of had an opposite reaction to you guys, which is probably a thing that happens a lot, which is after doing this episode, I realized that I need to come into this with less expectations and less thoughts on things. And I needed to learn more about story. So what I started doing was like literally watching videos about script writing. I signed up for masterclass, and I've been watching Neil Gaiman and a bunch of other things, because I realized, like, while I'm a creative and interesting person, I don't know as much about like telling a story as you three do.
You're just so damn pure, Ron. I can't stand it sometimes.
It really is. Really.
You're just being a pure light.
You know what's wild though? Like that reaction in Ron is the exact sort of reaction that we want to inspire in the audience by even doing this show to begin with, right? Like the mission statement behind us even doing Reboot It is like, we want to elevate the appreciation for and understanding of how stories work and how putting a movie together works, so that we can get past some of the more like juvenile and uninformed opinions about these properties. And that may sound elitist, and I'll just own that. I 100% am. But like, I like hearing that you had that reaction, Ron, because that's exactly what we're trying to inspire here.
Yeah, I mean, I want to get better at things, and like, it's the same thing with stand-up. I realized I wasn't looking at this the way I look at stand-up. The way I look at stand-up is like, I go and I do stand-up, and if jokes don't go well, I don't get mad about the jokes going well anymore than I go, okay, well, I messed up, and I'll be upset about that for a minute, but then I go, well, how do I fix this? And then I take the steps to get better at stand-up. And I should be doing the same thing with this type of thing, not just because it's rebooted and it's whatever, but it's storytelling. Like, I should be getting better at that. Like, I love stories. I mean, I read fantasy books. I write fantasy books.
And not to be patronizing or anything, but it's not gone unnoticed. I think I called your ass on one of the episodes. I was like, this fool talk about the central wound. Look at this. Look at the big brain on Brad. Talk about this dude's got the central wound, daddy. He was wounded as a child. And like, look at this guy coming up with all the motivations and the mythic structure and the hero with 1,000 faces. This guy.
Well, so I don't want this to get too navel gazing. So I mean, let's start maybe transitioning, because I think that where we ended up on the episode, I was actually fairly happy with, in a
Yes.
weird way. Like this whole idea of we're presenting the reality of what sort of a post-singularity society might look like, and what sort of an integrated human machine society might look like, where there isn't this sort of forever war going on, where it is like the humans have basically decided to become machines, and the machines are the humans. But you don't know that when you start, and the guy who wakes up and thinks that he has to fight the oppressive system is really just a mistake. And so the system is trying to reintegrate him so that it runs optimally, but he takes his rugged individuality to sort of become a freedom fighter. And we as the audience, slowly over the course of the story, start to realize, like, oh my God, everything this guy is doing is wrong. It's sort of like you start looking at him as a freedom fighter and you end looking at him as a terrorist. And he then has to take the journey of like, oh my God, I've empowered these other people. This gets into the Fight Club thing that we got to towards the end. I've empowered all these other minds, freed them from the system, set them down the self-destructive path, but like it's gonna ruin everything. And to me, that is meaty and interesting. And no, it wasn't a fully developed story, but like for as contentious of a road as it took to get there, I really liked that.
Yeah, I liked the idea too. I thought it was great, and it put together what I kind of wanted, which was not as high-minded as it, but like I really did want to see where a relationship between AI and people could go, and I think you guys took it there. How about you guys?
I just the again, the thing that weirded me out about the episode was it felt like a novel idea, and like that was the thing that like us. I think that's what left a little bit of bad taste in our mouths, even though we at the end we did pull off a story. We put together one, and one that made sense, and one that was avant-garde. Because if you look at how, I don't like people saying things are dated or things have aged poorly, but given the fact that everybody seems to be in the streets fighting against the system right now, I don't know if I would be super down with like, no, just do as you're told storytelling right now.
But it is an interesting question though. Yeah, but go
no, you're right. It is, because what if that's kind of the point of the story. What if it was though? What if, just like during the quarantine, frankly, it was better that for a time everyone acquiesced to a certain lifestyle for the greater good? You know what I'm saying? It was almost like right after we had decided that wasn't workable, the human race was put into a situation where they literally had to do what we said about in the story.
Yeah, I think honestly that's why I think after I got really heated, I almost went into like this like blind kind of awake coma where I was just like, yeah, that sounds great. I love that. I don't remember contributing anything because I just wanted it to end. And honestly, like I don't really like that pitch of a story. I still don't. I don't think it's that interesting to me personally. And I think for all the reasons we just laid out, like if that came out now, it would be so tone deaf to what is happening in 2020, even though it had nothing to do with that. Like just spiritually, it just feels so disconnected from like what is happening in front of us that I'm not sure that would even be a message that I could get behind. Like losing your individuality for the sake of holding up the group, I almost feel like summed up why I was getting so irritated in that moment, was because I feel like that's exactly what I was being asked to do, and I was like, this sucks and I hate it. So that's why I just like
so meta.
But I think at a certain point I was just like, sure, sounds great. Like I can literally smell dinner being cooked right now, and I just want to get out of this room.
No. I just want to interject. I could totally tell when everybody checked out, because I was like, just please let these needles get out of my eyes. You were like, I'm so hot. Bill was like, dude, I solved it. Let's get out of here. Ron was like, I love everything. And it was like that meme of the dog sitting inside the fire. Like, this is fine. At the end, I was like, this is fine, as in end it. And it felt so different from other rebooted episodes. Because as you saw, right, the next few ones, I think the next 3 after that were just like, boom, ping, ping, bang, 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 bang.
No, fire, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, we were all on fire. We all, I think we learned the to not come into this loaded for bear, as it were, come into some of these concepts loaded for bear. But again, I also think we learned that like preconceived notions can really mess stuff up, especially if you're not successful at pushing through, because nobody's gonna enter this with no preconceived notion. That's
No.
Impossible. Sure. But to push through it and to really listen to the group and try to make that group mind,
to be open to ideas is the key. It's not having ideas, it's to be open to other ideas. And I think we've done pretty well on that. And speaking of that, I think this is a great time for us to start moving into talking about some of the comments that people left.
Let's do it. But Ron, before you get into that, I'm just going to address a couple things in the chat.
Sure.
Sartak Bandari, I hope I'm saying your name right. You had an interesting idea. You said, having recently watched Pi from Darren Aronofsky, my idea is inspired by that film. What if the Matrix is humanity's attempt to communicate with higher dimensional beings or God? It's an interesting idea. I feel like you're layering way more spirituality than on a movie that's already dripping in spirituality, which I don't think is something to shy away from, but I don't know.
I like that better, honestly. Just as a template for something.
Well, just jumping on that, Ho-Chi Anderson has a comic book out right now called Godhead, and the whole adventure started because a corporation has found a device that can literally talk to God. And
Which is kind of what Pi. Yeah, that's kind of Pi.
Yeah. No, yeah, yeah.
I love that idea. I just feel like so much of the Matrix becomes about systems of control, right? Like that is the theme of the movie. So if you were to go down that road, I would just want the story to address, how is religion a system of control? How is the concept of God in and of itself a system of control? So that's where I would be pushing if we went that way.
And I would just say there's no computer that can talk to God when there's no God. You know what I mean? That's just me. And that's where I would have a problem with that. So moving on. No, I'm just kidding.
Ron, there is no spoon swallow.
Yeah. Yeah, look, that's the only place I get negative. No, I'm just kidding.
No, and so Sartak Bandari also says, what would a post-singularity society look like? I think the problem lies in the details. I just wanted to address that because I think that's both correct, but also something that I would love to see media get past on a macro sense. I think that we are, the advances in computing power are growing exponentially, and there's this idea that the singularity, which is the moment at which computer thought basically outpaces human thought, is feeling more and more real. And the reason it's called the singularity is because there's an event horizon. You can't see the other side of it. And so for the longest time, stories have sort of skirted up to the edge of that and then not really tried to address, well, what does society look like when super intelligent computers are constantly optimizing everything without humans being involved? It's kind of scary, and it's also hard to know because we can't think that way. That said, I think there's ways to start to get into that territory, and we're going to have to from an entertainment and art standpoint because it's a reality we're going to end up dealing with sooner than later. So
yeah, and just what I was going to say is that's what made it so maddening to me is just what you just said, Bill. The fact that the Wachowskis literally had a philosophical debate and boiled it down to a freaking kung fu fight.
Yeah,
that's the brilliance of the Wachowskis. They were able to take basically a bunch of philosophies, put them in a blender, and have them kung fu fight for supremacy in front of people. It's like if you were trying to make a way for dumbasses to understand philosophy, you couldn't do any better than that if you tried. You never could defeat that. You never could.
Well, and it had it had something for everybody. That was
so that's why I was so like I was making the cross fingers against the Dracula of this idea and putting garlic around my neck like Akuma. You know what I'm saying? Because I just hated that we were going to try to do something better than philosophical kung fu fights. The fact that we were trying to beat that, I'm just like, what beats that? Like literally what beats that?
But that's the point of the show for me, not to like get into the same argument, but it's like
I know that's why
I was
we had our
so
clash though.
Frustrated because you're probably right. Nothing beats Kung Fu, and it's like once you bang your head into the wall for an hour and realize like, oh, like we don't have something better. But I think my point was like I didn't regret trying. And I didn't want to say no to at least trying, because then we say no to a lot of other things that I still want to try.
And you brought me around on that, just to make it very, very clear. You did bring me around to that, because some of the things that we tried subsequent, I was just like, you know what? I tried to stop us from being dumb. I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop doing it now.
It's amazing, Ed, because like as one of like honestly one of the best stand-ups I've ever seen in my whole life. I've been doing comedy for 26 years. I've seen comedians up and down this whole pack. I have seen you also, pardon my French, eat a dick on stage plenty of times, but you've always looked at what you did and fixed it and got better. And I think that's the same thing was what we were doing on this. It's like you just look at the things that didn't go well and you just keep working on it and you keep getting better and better and better.
Well, dude, I mean, if and when there's a position as failure salesman, you got the job, Ron. You got it. You convinced me of the value of it. But at the time, I did not see it as that. I thought it was whack for our business model to show ourselves to be mortal in this fashion. And I knew that everybody knew that from our stumblings and bumblings and the fact that we don't edit any of it. But at the same time, we stumble and bumble our way into some genius stuff all the time. And to see us stumble and bumble and knife each other to death like a bunch of cats in a bag, it was too much for me. I couldn't understand it. I couldn't process it. And I couldn't process how to show our necks in that fashion. And what it dawned on me after this premiered was how much people, I don't want to say care about us, that's a bit much, but they do care to see the reality of what we're doing. And I think that episode after that, I saw a spike in the numbers, it seems like people were really kind of tuning in to be like, this could go off the rail. It was like we became NASCAR. Part of
when does the wreck happen? When does the wreck happen?
Dude, part of the appeal is that it could. You hope it doesn't. You hope it goes great and we have a great fun race. But part of the appeal is that it might not. And I didn't see that before this, and now I do. And it's exciting now. It's given an excitement to the rest of the episodes, frankly.
Cool.
So, Ron, let's get into those comments.
Let's do it. So the first one, which is this is a really good one. We got from first off, I just want to say thank you guys for commenting, for caring about this. And so we're gonna read these, tell you guys some of our favorite ones, and try to talk about them a little bit. So this one's from Dex Baker, and he said.
Topical as hell. Wow.
Yeah.
More than somewhat.
Wow.
I think that was Ron's idea in the episode. That idea that like at one point we all chose to be in this, and then we generationally forgot about it. So again, Ron, as much as you feel like you're lagging behind, bring in the gold into the episode, man.
Yep. Well, you know, when I watched The Matrix, I remember the first time I watched The Matrix, one of my first thoughts was, man, how cool would it be to do that? To be in the Matrix and be like doing the kung fu and having all the cool stuff, you know what I mean? So
if we end up in the Matrix, it's going to 100% be because we chose to be there. It will have nothing to do with a war. It will just have to do with, we thought this simulated virtual reality was awesome, and it was so awesome we never wanted to leave, and next thing you know, hyper intelligent machines are using us for batteries.
Dude, and I'm telling you something. The guy who wrote Ready Player One is the first life model decoy robot. He really put it in our minds that the Oasis is the dopest place to be. And so if you think about it, the stuff in Ready Player One is just the Matrix with most of the bad stripped away, with it being more of a game, with it being more of a, a distraction than like a world. You know what I'm saying? Both of them have dominating systems, but I just think it's interesting that we're liking these ideas of being away from reality more and more as outside gets more and more dangerous. This seems like a perfect storm for a matrix to happen. What we're going through right now is with as much time as we spend away from each other. You're away from other human beings. You're inside, and the only way that you can connect with other people is get on the dang internet and jack in some kind of way. It's a perfect storm.
Speaking of which, the comments just blew up. Apparently, Billy, when we are bringing the image up on screen, we're losing sound.
Yeah, we'll try to fix that.
Okay.
That's what, if you see me looking off to the corner right now, I saw that. I'm gonna see if I can fix it. We'll test it in a sec.
Thanks for bearing with us, guys. We're this reboot rewind format is something we're figuring out as we go along, and we like the fact that it's way looser than the normal episode.
And speaking of way looser than the normal episode, you guys, we're gonna take a quick little break. It's not really a break. It's an opportunity because look, we love your guys' comments and we love your guys' support, and because of your guys' support, we've gotten like a lot of bravery, and we're gonna try something new. So I want to give it up to Bill to talk about Goat Comics coming up.
Ron with that smooth transition.
Right? It's like an aluminum siding salesman.
Yeah, guys, gonna just take 30 seconds here. If you haven't seen the video, we are doing original comics. This is a project that has been long in the making. This is something that Ed and I are spearheading. It's called Goat Comics, and we're running a Kickstarter. So Goat Comics is a 48-page prestige graphic album. It's an anthology. We're doing short stories, glimpses. There's going to be 6 different concepts created by myself and by Ed, some of which stretch back to our childhoods, some of which are new and fresh and interesting. But we're just trying to give you a dump from our brains. Great art, great stories, great characters, stuff that we think you will love. And you can get a pre-order on June 22nd when the Kickstarter goes live.
Yeah, I am so pumped to check out how this all turns out. Obviously, I get a little bit of a behind-the-scenes look, but I'm telling you guys, it is super exciting to see what these guys have come up with. It's beautiful and artistic and interesting, and comes from these 2 big brains.
And I'll just say one last word on it, because I don't want to be a horn tooter or whatever, but I will say this about the project. As we have taken this last period of time to put together the material to make this book, and I've seen the stuff that Bill's doing, it's so inspiring. And I go back to how I was thinking when I saw his work first come through, and how it pumped me up to like raise my level. So this is the best stuff that I've ever done. I think this is the best compendium of stuff that Bill's ever done. You're getting the best of us in this. So please get on there on June 22nd and support it, please.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Yes, absolutely. I said that on purpose. Really, I totally did.
I want to answer a couple questions that came up on the chat. Sure. Goat Comics, yes. Not only is Ed drawing his own story, Ed is drawing 3 stories plus illustrations of the battle royales that we do on NerdGoat. So that's something that you guys have been asking for, is animation, comics, something. We are dramatizing some of those battle royales. Another question, will you ship internationally? There will be an international option. Kickstarter is only specifically available in a few countries, I think mostly in Europe. If you are not in one of those countries, down the line, we will make the books available as merchandise, but you will not be able, unfortunately, to be part of the initial buy-in. So if you are in a country that gets Kickstarter, yes, we will ship to you. If not, it will be available eventually. And probably the first thing that will be available is a digital copy. So that'll be something to look for once the books come out.
Awesome. And let's get back to those comments. Here's a good one from Erica Kamatalo. Hopefully I did not destroy that name. I wish you had taken the concept of joining a collective a step further and discussed the point at which continuing to exist is no longer worth the loss of our true humanity. I think that would have been more revolutionary, responsible, and harder, but that's just my taste.
This was one I responded to specifically in the comments, because I thought this was an amazing comment and a really good take, and totally wrong. And Billy, I want to hear your opinion on this. But my feeling is, this goes back to the whole post-singularity world that Sartak Bandari brought up in the comments. You don't know that it won't be worth it. You can't say that because you don't know what the reality will be at that time. That's you imposing early 21st century perspective on a world that you cannot understand. And that's why I think it's really interesting story ground, because yes, right now, the way society is set up, the way our brains function, the fact that we are not networked in to other people's experiences emotionally, physically, mentally, whatever, it's not a good idea to just join the collective. It very well may be in 100 years' time when your personal experience of life, the things you think and feel and believe, aren't separated by meat bags from the guy next to you. It's going to be a totally different world, and that's the sort of thing that I would want the story to explore.
Yeah, it's like worrying about your job when you live in Star Trek land. You don't need to worry about it.
No, but I mean, that's a good example, Ron, because like if you live in a post-scarcity society where everything is manufacturable on a nanoscale at no cost and free energy exists throughout the universe that can take you anywhere at light speed, you don't really need to have a job, because money, all money is it's a way to partition limited resources. It's a system to structure how we're using things that are rare and valuable. When things no longer become rare and valuable, you don't really need a job.
Yeah.
So again, I love stories that tread ground like that. And I hate people, I'll say it, I hate people who can't expand their minds to consider that that might be a possibility. I'm not saying it will happen, but you got to have the intellectual flexibility, the bandwidth to say that might be how things are. The things I value in my life might be totally worthless in X number of years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're all getting that a little bit while we're living in quarantine. It's like values and ideas of what's important really has changed. So let's also, anybody else want to comment on that?
I don't know. I feel like you pimped me out, Bill, but I'm actually like fairly apathetic to it. Like I see where you're coming from. I just am nowhere near the zealot that you are when it comes to free your mind, man. It's like I get where she's coming from. That's probably what my kind of thought process was as well going into the show, but it's also just like I don't want to say this because this is such like a shitty thing to say, especially like halfway into this, but it's just like I really loved those Matrix sequels. It really made me think, but I don't know if I care enough. Like I just feel like in general the philosophy stuff is just, it's a little bit like, I'll say it, I'm a little bit more of a simpleton than I think I would rather admit to myself. Like I either don't know or don't care enough to really like dig into the like free your mind shit. Like that's why I think the idea of like an animatrix was so appealing to me, because it's like I just liked the concept of the Matrix as like a vehicle to tell other kind of interesting stories around, not like let's rewrite Nietzsche for 2 hours and put some kung fu in it. That's just me, because I don't know, I start to get a little cross-eyed when it starts to get like the singularity of the okay, sure. Yeah.
Well, just let me jump in from the centrist chair. I'm right in the middle of both of you guys, because I get everything Bill is saying, and I get what you're saying, and it's not some defense of being a dullard. It is, I come at it as knowing the rules of drama is quite hard enough. And to me, to be able to dramatize things physically, especially in an action, I guess we weren't even thinking about whether we were going to make it strictly an action movie. We were just trying to see if we could explore the Matrix concept. But like, to me, the action is part of it. And when and like, it felt like it was stripping, as we got more collective, it was stripping away opportunities for action and making action more sucker punchy, to where it was kind of removed from the actual act of whatever the meat bags were doing. And it just kind of got a little, but I definitely see exactly what you guys are talking. It's just like, to me, it felt like I was trying to do a dramatic reading in a foreign language. And I felt like it was hard enough to just speak the foreign language cogent enough for people to understand what we were saying. So let's just speak broken French and get our baguette and be on our way. But Bill wanted to be like, no, I will debate science with you. I just learned French yesterday. And it was like, oh my God. I was just like, this is too much. But again, it's what the show is about. We're going to tug each other in these different ways.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Cool. Awesome. I obviously have nothing to say about that.
So let's have another question.
Yeah. Reggie Rules. He said, I'm not a creative. I'm just a fan of pop culture in almost any form I can get it. But I feel you fell into the same trap the Wachowskis did in the second two movies. This kind of actually addresses what we were just talking about, actually, where you let the high concept and thought-provoking background stuff get in the way of the story and be in the foreground instead. I mean, the Matrix movie / story is that our reality isn't real and it's being controlled by another, in this case, an AI, and it is discovered and broken free from by individuals who question reality and find a way out, and the one to then fight the AI Matrix. Taking your idea of the individual, the one versus the whole, the Matrix, in a similar setup with the question of who is right and who is wrong is really cool. You just got bogged down by the question and kind of ignored the story and got really upset with each other for 40, 50 minutes before getting halfway to a reboot and then gave up. I'll say 3 out of 5 only because you didn't finish it, but I'll still give it a thumbs up. And that was from Reggie Rules.
That's kind of where I fell. I feel like we got so enamored with the question that it just became like the story was secondary. And I understand, like, you kind of, you know, it's a little bit of the chicken and the egg thing, but it's just like, I don't know, with all due respect to all three of you on the screen, we were just so far up our own asses that it was just like tedious and monotonous after a while. Like, those 45 minutes may as well have been, you know, 4 or 5 years at that point in terms of like my attention span.
It's wild because like I was so into that, like by the last half hour of that episode, I was so into the conversation, but I also was very aware that the rest of you guys weren't, and so it became sort of a weird experience. And I just also want to address the point that he made in his comment is almost the whole problem of this thing. The Matrix as a story is not about people who are in a system who wake up and start to fight back, because the Matrix Reloaded tells you specifically nobody woke up, nobody freed their own minds. This is a system that was designed to make you think that was happening, and you just believed it because you're a rube. Like, that is the story. And so then it becomes something else. Whether or not they executed that really well, debatable. And like, I'm not going to defend those movies on an execution level, but on a conceptual level, I liked what they did. And it just becomes hard to talk about the sequel because I still think most people don't get that that was the point of Reloaded.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. Right. Yep. I think that's exactly right.
And the next comment we got from Manuel Castro. Was listening to this one while driving, and in my head I was thinking 2 movies. Movie 1, the main character starts to experience deja vu or recalling memories they don't remember living. This leads to them to question reality a la Truman Show. As the AI tries to correct this glitch, the character starts to manipulate the simulation and eventually escapes, but only to find that the world is in shambles and they're not the only one to have done this. Movie 2 is like Snowpiercer, where the people that have escaped the simulation lead a revolution against the AI, only to find that the reason they were there in the first place was a willing decision from humans of the past to either escape life or to better the world, but the AI ran the simulation too long, and now the revolters have to decide to go back and live a lie, or to learn from the past and think differently, and maybe work with the AI instead of allowing it to do everything. I don't know. IDK.
Love that ending.
Yeah, I know. Me too. I don't know. I just this crazy big these crazy couple of big concepts. I don't know.
Dude, no, that sounds like me. I love it. that's exactly right. But yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I mean, I think that's an interesting concept. I think that falls into the trap that I was feeling a lot about everything that came up in our Matrix episode. Like, it's fine, but it just doesn't feel like the Matrix, because it doesn't feel like it's gonna blow me on my ass the way that I would want a Matrix movie to. So that's just me.
Yeah.
Well, it's just also there's a dark cityification to a lot of things, right? Even things like the movie Upgrade. A lot of times you have an adventure and the hero has such agency throughout so much of it, and then at the end or near the end they're sort of stripped. You know, usually that happens in action movies where the hero, what was working for them stops working, and you have to find a new way. But some of these science fiction movies, they just sort of go, nah, you suck. You're in the simulation. You suck. You lost. And like that really bothered me. And that's what I came in with preconceived notions about, is like, how could we make the ending of the first one not like the most perfect ending ever? The ending of the first one would be, now you're ready to fight. Like, you guys were losing so bad, it was hilarious. There was no resistance. But now that you guys actually have one, you got a chance now. The second one is, oh, this thing is harder to kill than ever, and we try hard, and at the end we sort of fail. And then the third one is about us winning. Simple. We were just like, nope, no thank you. And that was just like, oh, okay. Because I felt like it was going to be Star Wars. Honestly, just one last thing. I felt like it was going to be Star Wars. I felt like the universe was going to hate us. We were going to hate each other for trying it. And then somewhere in the middle, we were going to go, oh, but what if he doesn't have to be that? And It was going to click. I just thought that was going to happen. And when it didn't, it was so like disheartening. You know what I mean? So like, yeah, that was just fine.
Yeah, I want to take this opportunity. We got a couple more comments to get through, but if you guys in the chat want to suggest anything, if you want to respond to anything that we're saying, do it now, because we're winding down here. Even though I'm sure we could go on about this for hours. So get your comments in. I'm looking at them. If it's good, we'll bring it up.
Cool. Let's see. What do we got next? Oh, Ultimate Kyubi Fox. I don't know if I'm saying that right. What I was not expecting in this episode is how Ron was actually kind of invaluable. Plenty of times I felt like he would be trying to reach a synthesized early conclusion, but really he was keeping the conversation going and made sure that everyone else continued trying. The interrogation where he got into, let's all name 2 things we've liked so far, was in hindsight the only reason this episode managed to find a plot for the story. I've been in many group situations where a person wasn't there to try and touch base with everybody, and the whole thing would just fall apart. I think I genuinely learned something here. Not to mention, I actually think the story idea that this episode gets to by the end is pretty great. I can imagine a version of this movie that's super bold and engaging. I'd maybe get Darren Aronofsky on this as director, because it'll take the fountain levels of director flair to make it work, but it definitely could. This movie needs to be visually nuts.
I think it's so true. Just to get like genuine for a moment, I think between myself and Ed and Bill, at any given point, there can be 2 of us that almost gang up on the other one. And Ron's kind of like the wait. Let's all and you know, I agree. Sometimes I do feel like when things get a little heated, Ron, maybe your default position is like, I love it. It's great. We're all friends. Don't worry. Like, we still love each other. But and I think in this case, you know, this poster is 100% right. Where it's like, in hindsight, it's almost like we were all sitting there with our arms crossed, and it was like no one even wanted to bother to try to salvage it except you at that point. I mean, honestly, this was kind of like the Beatles' Let It Be. It's like, unfortunately, you just watched 4 creatives who just weren't getting along, didn't want to do it, and it's like, here's the shittiest bunch of shit. Someone make something out of it. And it took, I think you kind of Ringo'd us into at least admitting that not everything was terrible, and that there was enough on the table that we could at least try to keep it going. So it's like, you know, in that sense, yes, your positivity, while we sometimes rag on you, it's like invaluable, because the rest of us can be very cynical and kind of sarcastic.
Co-signed 100%. I think we just lost Ron.
Ron was just so touched by the sentiment.
That was perfect.
Ron left so he could go cry it out a little bit.
That was perfect.
In his absence, I will say, though, that I 100% co-sign that, and I think that is an invaluable presence to have in any group, especially any group of like smart people with a certain amount of ego. You need somebody who can be that egoless giver, who can be the person to be like, oh, Ron's back. Perfect. Ron, I was just saying that in any group of people, you need someone who can be egoless, who can be the middle ground, who can remind everybody that like we're all in this together. And I think that you serve that function in this group remarkably well. So
thank you, you guys. And you know, it's so funny because I remember I read that comment, and this was like I read that comment shortly after quarantine started, and I was a little panicked. I didn't know if I was going to be able to get unemployment, blah blah blah, all that stuff that I think everybody was feeling at that time, right? And because I was feeling so negative, the only thing I read was, this guy's surprised that I put anything into this. Which is hilarious, because it just gives you the idea, you know what I mean? Like, it just gives you the idea of like where your mood can be that can make you believe of something when you read something. And then when I reread it later, it was like, oh, okay, well, what I did was I, did the thing that I like to do, which is to try to like be like, hey, this is what we're trying to do together. We try to, be positive. And yeah, like I said, it helped me realize that I do need to get better at storytelling, because look, I love you guys and like you guys, and I want to be on the same level.
Just like you did the most adult responsible thing, which is like Ed and I just decided to tear each other down, and your instinct is to like, how can I make myself better? And my instinct is like, how can I blame someone else? So honestly, like, I know that sounds funny, but like it definitely like is an inspiration where it's like, and it took me 3 weeks to get to the point where I was like, maybe my ego's the problem. It took you 30 seconds to realize like your ego didn't matter and you needed to fix things around you. And then on top of that, you're like, I wonder how I can use this to better myself. Like, that shit's inspiring. Like, out of the 4 of us, the amount of character that comes out of that is staggering.
Also,
thanks, guys.
Darren Aronofsky, inspired choice for director. Agreed. Just to get back to the whole behind the scenes follow-up of the whole thing.
Agreed. Absolutely. And let me just be cheesy for a second and say that really makes me feel nice, because I'm not always confident and I'm insecure about things, just like I think everybody else in the world is. So this type of thing is a nice thing to hear for when you guys comment stuff like that. It really does hit us where you think it hits us. And yes, Darren Aronofsky, I don't know if you could do much better with the concept that Bill is and everybody kind of came to at the end there. So 100% agree.
Yeah, well, that was a long road. It was a long road to get to that stage of story, and it really kind of made me see the value in the times that we are clicking. That's why in the end I felt like it was okay to put it up, because I was fighting even putting it out. I had a bomb on the tarmac, and I was like, we're not going to Mars, and I was going to throw that mug in the turbines. and you guys talked me off the gantry. You guys were like, okay, Houston, you have a problem with drinking. Sit down, and it's okay. It's okay for us to show ourselves to be human. I have a real problem being human in front of people, because I feel like I do it so much already.
But you know I kind of think that's what makes the good ones even better, is when you see that it's not like we edit this so we hit a grand slam every time. That was my whole thing, was like, you got to show the warts so that when we do feel good about it, it's like, yeah, see, we earned that one. We didn't earn this one, but we've earned like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
And one last thing, I love the inside the park home runs we've gotten. The doubles that hit the top of the wall.
The ground rule
talking
double.
about it for a while. You know what I mean? I love those ones.
That was like
as
James
anything.
Bond. We'll have to do James Bond eventually, because that was one where it was just like, it took 40 minutes to get of that hour episode to finally get like, oh, there it is, you know?
We also got blown up in the comments on James Bond, where everyone's like, oh, so you just created the Amazon Jack Ryan series.
Dude,
Real good job.
We had pitched Kingsman. We had pitched Mission Impossible. We had pitched Leslie Nielsen's Spy Hard. We pitched everything.
I haven't seen that Jack Ryan, so
I saw the first episode, and it's not great, but maybe it gets better. I will say this in the chat, something that keeps coming up is everybody keeps throwing out suggestions for other things that we should do and other properties. People are saying that we should come up with stories for toy lines, this and that. Oh. Look, we have had a lot of discussions about what are the natural spin-offs of Reboot It? Like, can we do sequelize it? Can we do adapt it? I mean, there's a lot of interesting things we could do on this channel. For right now, Reboot It is focused on movie franchises that have already been, that we're bringing back, and trying to walk that fine line of like, how do we reconcile what people already think with what other movies have done, with what this thing is at its core, and actually come up with something cool? I think that's an interesting question. In order to do the spin-offs, we got to come up with like, all right, what is that journey? What are those problems? How do we turn this into an interesting discussion? But it is in the cards.
Absolutely. And then we got this great questions from via Twitter. Cheyenne B. Hodgson. 2 questions popped into my brain as I rewatched. One, do you know what JP's calls are going to be beforehand, or are they done in the moment? It seems as though they are created in the moment so that they can soften or complicate the process as needed. 2, watching back, is this whole episode as meta to you as it was to me? Talking about conformity for the greater good, individuality. Sub question, when working on a team, how does your own individual goal either improve or detract from the process? Yeah, I think we've answered a little bit of this stuff, but like, let's talk about it some more.
Well, how about this? How about we answer the last part first, because it's
okay.
maybe the first people's brains. How do you like apply your process? For me personally, I take a real pride in being more of like LeBron, like not as far as being so dope and everything, but like LeBron plays good, but he also passes the ball to other people so that they can play good. I take pride in that, and that's all I think about. I don't think about how to get my dope ideas off, because that's thinking about your shot. I get my shot in the flow of the game, but I'm more part of my brain is thinking about passing the ball.
I'm going to co-sign that. I think this show works best when we are trying to have the exact same experience doing it that we want you guys to have watching it. Like, so much of this show is about us discovering and connecting and making those in the moment connections of like, oh my God, because the ultimate end goal is really to come up with a story and a product that like surprises and delights and moves us in some way. And I think the interesting thing is, we want to do that in the moment, number one, because it's a test of our storytelling skills. Like, without preparing anything, can we just do that? Do we know what we're doing enough? And number two, being able to bounce it between us is so much better than us just having all those internal conversations in our head of like, well, what would this, because these are the same conversations that you have even if you're writing something solo. It's just you have to have them with yourself if you're doing it solo.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and you don't have the benefit of other people.
Yeah.
I think I've only come into, honestly, 1, maybe 2 episodes. It's probably not even the ones you would think, like not Star Wars. I come in as almost as blank slate as I can. And Ed, you know this from doing SJU with me. I hate scripts. I hate following something. Anytime I get a script for SJU, I literally would throw it on the floor because I don't want to know what's coming. And even with like, and this will transition into part 1 of the question, but even when we were putting together the live finale for Fantastic Four, full disclosure, I guess, behind the curtain, the John Peters thing had to be recorded ahead of time. We had to kind of sync it, and I stopped it so I wouldn't know what it was, because I never want anything influencing me going into it. So my approach is always like blank slate, and sometimes that's great, especially if I know the material. Sometimes it's not full. I will admit that G.I. Joe, I think it worked in the He-Man episode to not know anything, but G.I. Joe just coming in blank, I had nothing to contribute, and that's why I'm fairly quiet in that episode. But for the most part, I don't like to come in really with any ideas. Maybe I'll grab a couple directors, but even a lot of times, like, I try to just be blank, because you're right, like, nothing I come up with solo is probably going to be as interesting or even applicable by the time that we get into the episode.
Yeah, I never like coming into the episode with casting or director choices, because I feel like those are best when they are actual reactions to the story. And it's like, what if we would have come into the Back to the Future episode being like, for example, Tom Holland should be the star of this movie. But then in the course of the conversation, we realize, no, the star of this movie is a woman. So we're not going to try to force Tom Holland to be the star of this movie. And I think that works with the creative team as well, with the director choices. It's like, you don't want to force a director on a property. You want to figure out the best version of the property and then fit those pieces in to enhance it.
Yeah, absolutely. I gotta say, honestly, when we first started talking about doing this, I just thought I was gonna be the funny guy, because that's kind of what I do. I think of myself a lot of times more as a performer, and not as a creative type as these guys. But then after we did the Wolverine episode where it was just supposed to be a dry run, I was like, no, that's not my job. That's not what we're doing here. I got to be part of the whole process, and I got to learn a whole bunch of crap.
The John Peters question, I'm actually, I want to know myself, because Ron, Ed, and myself never know what the John Peters is going to be ever. So I want to know how you come up with those, Bill.
So I'll break kayfabe. I am John Peters. I play John Peters on the show. Which should be obvious. I don't know that the voice is that different, but no. So the John Peters thing, I never pre-plan. The only time I pre-planned John Peters was the Superman episode, because I knew that he would have all the same demands as during the Superman Lives writing process.
Right.
Otherwise, I think the tweet alluded to it. Sometimes I try to use John Peters to give us a kickstart if I feel like we need it, but that really just comes from listening to and responding to what's happening in the show. So I feel like sometimes if we get lost in the weeds, a casting suggestion or a story demand is going to get us going. Most of the time, though, I'm genuinely trying to F us. Most of the time, like, I want to give a suggestion that I would be horrified to hear. And so again, that comes from like listening and understanding where the show is going. And the one that comes to mind immediately that I don't think we really did a good job of integrating was in Back to the Future. We were so set on it being a family-friendly, all-ages adventure. I was like, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to demand a sex scene, because that is what screws us. So
I remember the one that I remember that I was like, was Power Rangers. Yeah, where it was like no suits, and I was like, nope, not doing that. We're gonna have to find a way around. That was for you, Billy. I know it was. It was personal, and I knew it.
Dude, Billy was sitting there in the full Power Rangers gear, and you're telling him he can't wear a suit? No thanks.
He's like, I can't wear my helmet right now, but I wish I could.
That said, the last comment on John Peters is that really happens so often.
Oh, totally. Yeah. That's why it was such a kick in the nards, because that's almost what happened in the in the first Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie. They had to take the visors out of their helmets, which was such a bad idea that they filmed a week and they were like, never mind. But just like a John Peters, when they did the reboot, the idea was still there. It still stuck, and they had to do it. And that's why the Power Rangers helmets look so stupid in the reboot, was because that demand from a producer came all the way from 95 and followed all the way to 2017. So that stuff happens all the time.
Let me tell a quick story, just because we're on our Reboot It Rewind Riff Fest. I produced a show for VH1 that was set in a club, and it was following the bottle service girls in the club. And like, we had originally pitched sort of an upstairs, downstairs, like interconnected world thing where it involved the owners and the DJs and the big spenders and all this. And VH1 was like, we want the show to be about bottle girls. So we're like, fine. So I go down to San Diego. We're working with the top nightclub company in San Diego. We shoot the pilot. We deliver a rough cut of the pilot, and the network is like, why are all these girls so skimpily dressed? And we're like, because they're bottle service girls. They work in lingerie. We sent you pictures going into the pilot. You knew this. And they're like, yeah, but we didn't know how skeevy it would come off. And we're like, this is why we wanted to do the upstairs, downstairs worlds. But we don't have that because you specifically asked for something different. And they're like, you have to cut out all the lingerie shots. And we're like, that is literally any time they're working in the club. And they're like, yeah, I guess you'll have to figure it out. And that show didn't end up going, but that's how it worked.
Yep.
Well, yeah, no,
Yeah.
I just got to
Don't-
say this too. You said, Bill, you admitted that sometimes you try to spruce us up a little bit, but I swear to God, 9 times out of 9.5, it doesn't feel that way. Sometimes it feels like that Jim Gaffigan bit. Like sometimes I don't even think the show's going that well, and then you do a really horrible Peters, and I'm like, dude, what are you doing? It's like when you're wrestling and your friend does a real DDT on you, your neck actually hurts, and you're just like, oh, we were playing, Daddy. This is kayfabe.
I mean, that was the whole point of the idea when we came up with the idea, was to make it tough and make it funny, because we could get caught telling this story or whatever, but now we got to work around this very difficult subject. So that's going to make us be a little bit funnier in that situation, but also be creative coming up with a solution.
I would love to know if John Peters, if he ever heard what we were doing, if he would think it was funny or if he'd be super offended.
Oh, dude, I am waiting for the day I receive a legal notice from his lawyers, because I will make that difficult for them, and we will make all of it public. And at the end of the day, we may have to stop using his likeness, but we'll get some amazing content out of it.
We'll do Pond Jeters.
It's going to be amazing.
Producer to the
That's
stars.
awesome. Let's hope it happens then. So then this last comment that we were going to talk about, and maybe we'll talk about some of the comments in the thing as well. I don't know. But we got Alden Diaz. I absolutely loved this episode. I think it was actually important to not achieve rebooted for the first time. This felt like the same creative, explosive energy that came out in the Star Wars episode, but cranked up to 11. Now, that's not to say the more argumentative topics are better. That's not necessarily true. The ones where it flows and everyone just feels like they're crushing it are super fun, and they're an important component of the rebooted magic. But at the same time, there's equal importance in these tense, combative ones. It's a true reflection of the creative process, and you all still started to come together, which made it even more satisfying. What I gathered from the actual pitch that started to come together was that it honestly should probably be a miniseries. So many ideas, so many concepts, so many potential directions might be worth revisiting in an extended part 2 writer's room episode, ? Either way, thank you so much for the great content. I've been sharing the episodes with friends and it's been fun. Thanks for keeping it up even in quarantine.
You know, I think
Alden.
my stance on this episode will always be, it is a bad episode of Reboot It. It is a great kind of PSA for teamwork and for working within a group. And for that, it has value. But like I said, I don't see us coming back to like, all right, let's pick up where we left off. Like, you guys can do that one while I'm on paternity leave if you want.
I would agree with that. You know what's interesting? That dovetails with something that just came in on the chat. Charles Clark asks, have you guys ever considered having guests on the show for topics that might not be in your guys' wheelhouse? We've considered it and we've said no. That's sort of our feeling, at least as of this moment. Reboot Rewind, I think we want to be a little bit more of a free-for-all, but the main Reboot It show, that's us as a creative unit. And I think a lot of what we've talked about over the course of this episode, that idea of trusting your collaborators, everybody bringing something different into it, being able to work through these things, that dynamic is so different when you bring in a brand new voice. I mean, there's a reason that like writers' rooms take a long time to congeal, and season 2 is always better than season 1.
I would also say, like, to that point too, that's kind of the antithesis of what happens in Hollywood. A lot of times the reason why a reboot or a sequel or a franchise or something may not quite seem on to you is because they didn't bring in the expert on it. I'm trying to think, like, bringing in George Lucas for new Star Wars. We know that didn't happen. So I think the fact of the matter is, like, the whole point of the show is, can we, not as super fans, not writing fan fiction, but just as for creative executives, can we figure out how to relaunch a property that, I think it almost is a disservice, the episodes where it's like, unfortunately, I am such a Star Wars fan. Like, in a perfect world, I would recuse myself to keep the purity of the show. But it's almost like I'm a fan of a lot of things, but we don't want it to become, like I said, fan fiction, because that's not the goal of the show. The goal is, can we figure out, a lot of times with these, like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, we keep using that one because it's like, who the hell cares? It's like, well, Disney would care because that did make them some money, but it's like, that's it. You wouldn't go out and find the world's biggest Honey, I Shrunk the Kids fan to rewrite that. You just find some guys or some gals that are talented to try to bring a new spin, and that's what we're trying to do every episode.
Yeah, it's very difficult for fans to let go of things changing or necessary story moving into where they needed to go. Like, okay, no one should hire me to make a Terry Brooks TV show. I'm not gonna be loosey goosey on the fantasy series that I grew up reading. I'm not gonna be. I can tell you right now, in that specific arena, it is gonna be very hard for me to not be like, why don't we just make the book into a freaking movie and stop trying to make this other story or whatever you guys are doing? And that's not what we're trying to do here. I think that's why it wouldn't work. Experts want things to be the way. The Fantastic Four, for instance, somebody's going to just come in and be like, oh, why don't we just take the first 22 page arc and turn that into a movie? No, we can't do that. That wouldn't be good. I think that's part of the reason.
That said, they should definitely hire me to write Superman, though. So
yeah, but you can let go of stuff
at all.
No, not at all.
Dude, no. You know what? I gotta say, we're gonna. I think we maybe should do Superman as a reboot recap, because that was one of the ones where I felt like one of us was really close to it, and we still got the job done. You know what I mean? I think our whole, all of us have real feelings about the DC universe, and I think they all come out in those episodes. So that'd be something worth exploring down the line. We have real feelings about it, and yet we have enough detachment to be like, yeah, no, I don't want a big blue dudes. Nah, no blue dudes. They suck. And like, most people aren't willing to go screw the blue dudes. Most people aren't willing to go screw the Force ghosts. Most people aren't willing to just do that. And that we do that right off the bat, baby. We come in, we're killing darlings right off the bizat. And I don't think people really appreciate how much this group is willing to do that, even on stuff that we like. Because I'd argue, like, me personally, I think that maybe I got a little bit too protective of Batman in our live episode, but that was sabotaged 15 ways to Sunday from the get-go. So even in that episode, we were all able to coalesce on a story.
I mean, that
involved a lot of what we thought.
With you and me and Palpatine, I was like, "How dare you, sir, try to do Star Wars?"
Right. So the bottom line is, it takes a lot for us. I think adding another person, I think it's good in theory for people, but I don't think they really understand what. It's almost like you take one electron out of an atom and it becomes another thing. It's really infinitesimal. There's really small moves, Ellie. Small moves.
I mean, that's not completely accurate, but that's fine.
Whatever. Covalent bonds.
It becomes an ion. It's not like, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's still technically some of the same matter, and it's still in the same state, so technically.
All right. We should put this thing to bed before the science lesson starts.
Well, you guys, that was, as he said, we're putting it to bed. That does it for Reboot and Rewind. On behalf of myself, Ed Greer, producer Bill, and Billy Business, we want to thank you guys for watching and being part of this really special community we've built here. We love you guys. You're awesome. We appreciate everything you do, and we'll see you all the next time. Bye.
Starter, baby. June 22nd.